The stale air of the briefing room hung heavy, thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and the grim anticipation that always preceded a drop. Sergeant Kalen Claw Vance, his jaw a tight line beneath the stubble that perpetually shadowed his face, ran a calloused thumb over the worn leather of his combat knife's hilt. Across the steel table, the other members of Reaper's Hand mirrored his intensity. There was Jax, the unit's heavy gunner, a mountain of muscle barely contained within his armor, his eyes burning with a caged predator's focus. Liam, their tech specialist, usually the most composed, fidgeted with his datapad, his usual quiet demeanor replaced with a tightly wound energy. And finally, Reese, their scout and the youngest of the group, leaned forward, his youthful face etched with a hunger for the fight to come. They were Reaper's Hand, the spearhead of the 101st Airborne, a unit whispered about in hushed tones on both sides of the war, a testament to human ferocity. Once again, France ought to be grateful to the Great War, Reaper thought. The training, the support, the finances and talent available to him had put France in the game. "All right, listen up." Colonel Ramirez's voice, gravelly and commanding, snapped the room to attention. Holographic projections flickered to life above the table, displaying the Xyloxy homeworld, a network of obsidian spires reaching into a bruised purple sky. The Xyloxy are entrenched deeper than we predicted on Sector Gamma 7. Standard assault patterns aren't making a dent. A collective sigh rippled through the room. The Xyloxy, a species of spindly, chitinous beings, were proving to be a stubborn and frustrating enemy. Their defensive tactics were methodical, almost robotic, making them a difficult target for conventional military tactics. Ramirez paused, his gaze sweeping over the four men. "That's where you come in, Reaper's Hand. You're going to break the line. You're going in, you're going to hit them hard, and you're going to make them remember why they should have stayed in their own damned galaxy." Alan's lips curled into a predatory smile. He lived for these moments. Not the glory, but the raw, visceral release of pent-up aggression. It was an itch that had burrowed deep beneath his skin, a primal urge that only battle could satisfy. He glanced at the others. Jax's knuckles were white around the grip of his pulse rifle. Liam's knuckles were white around the edges of his datapad, and Reese's eyes had taken on a dangerous glint. They understood. They all did. The briefing continued, detailing their target. A heavily fortified Xyloxy command center, the nexus point of their defense network in Gamma 7. It was a near-sidal mission, a brutal meat grinder, but Reaper's Hand didn't flinch. They were built for this. Hours later, the drop pods plummeted through the Xyloxy atmosphere. The air crackled with friction and the roar of re-entry. Kalen felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the anticipation of the storm. Inside the pod, the four men sat in tense silence, each lost in their own private ritual of preparation. The pod slammed into the ground with bone-jarring force, the safety harness digging into Kalen's shoulders. He released the restraint, the heavy clang of the hatch releasing echoing through the wrecked landscape. The battle had already begun. Lasers crisscrossed the sky, explosions rocked the ground, and the air was thick with the smell of burning alien flesh. Jax was the first out, his heavy pulse cannon already roaring, tearing apart the Xyloxy defense lines with a hail of explosive bolts. Liam followed close behind, his datapad a blur as he hacked into the Xyloxy communication network, disrupting their defenses and creating openings in the enemy lines. Reese, silent as a shadow, weaved through the chaos, his sensorium sweeping the battlefield, painting a detailed picture of the enemy's movements. Kalen brought up the rear, his pulse rifle spitting death as he moved, a dark angel of destruction. But his rifle was merely a tool, an extension of his will. What truly set Kalen apart, what made Reaper's Hand the nightmare they were, was what happened when the limits of weaponry were surpassed. The Xyloxi, massing in larger numbers, began to push back. Kalen's HUD flickered with incoming fire. Jax's heavy gun was overheating, and the enemy lines tightened. That's when the shift began. Out! A low growl resonated in Kalen's chest, a sound that was barely human. His breathing hitched, his vision tunneled, and the world seemed to melt away, leaving only a raw, burning rage. He felt the familiar heat spread through him, the icy calm that settled over his mind, replaced by a primal, visceral savagery. It wasn't simply that he became faster, stronger, or more accurate. It was something more. He became a force of nature, an embodiment of pure, unadulterated aggression. He let out a bestial roar, a sound that echoed through the battlefield, and charged. He closed the distance to the closest Xyloxi warrior in a heartbeat, his combat knife flashing like lightning, a blur of death and fury. He ripped through the alien's chitinous armor, dismembering limbs and leaving a trail of shattered bone and green ichor in his wake. The other members of Reaper's Hand reacted to the change in Kalen with the practiced ease of men who had seen it countless times. Jax, with a savage grin, shifted his focus, laying down a relentless wall of covering fire, his cannon roaring like a trapped beast. Liam, his focus sharpened, weaved through the battle, exploiting the openings created by Kalen's rampage, his datapad spitting out crippling viruses and scrambling enemy communications. Liam took action that often proved. Reese darted ahead, his blade and pistol a symphony of lethal precision, picking off stragglers and setting up ambushes that funneled the Xyloxoi into the killing zone. The Xyloxi, for all their technological superiority and strategic planning, were utterly unprepared for what was happening to them. They were used to orderly battles, to calculated assaults, to predictable strategies. They had never faced anything like this. They were used to war, not savagery. Kalen moved through their lines like a whirlwind of destruction, his movements fueled by instinct, his attacks fueled by the burning need to tear and rend. Every slash of his blade, every crack of a bone, fueled the furnace within him. He wasn't just fighting, he was tearing apart, ripping the Xyloxi from the world. The blood, both his own and his enemies, smeared his armor, creating a macabre work of art. Around him, the others mirrored his intensity. Jax, normally a slow, methodical fighter, became a whirling dervish of firepower, his shots tearing through multiple targets with each pull of the trigger. Liam, usually meticulous and controlled, fought with a ruthless efficiency, disabling and dismantling Xyloxi drones and defenses with lightning-quick movements. Even Reese, the young scout, moved with a brutal grace, his attacks swift and decisive, his blade leaving behind a trail of lifeless forms. Their combined ferocity ripped the battlefield apart. The Xyloxi line buckled, then broke. Kalen, consumed by his fury, felt a perverse sense of satisfaction as he watched the alien lines collapse. He didn't feel remorse. He didn't feel guilt. He only felt the cold, savage satisfaction of the predator, the primal urge to hunt and destroy fulfilled. They pushed through, a whirlwind of fire and fury, leaving a trail of death and destruction in their wake. The command center, previously an impenetrable fortress, crumbled under their assault. The Xyloxi, once confident and calculating, were now scattered and terrified. Liam planted a virus that severed the Xyloxi command and control system, plunging the local defenses into chaos. Jax moved to the rooftops, providing suppressing fire as Reese swept the remaining corridors and room. Kalen stood sentinel in the middle of the command room, his chest heaving, blood staining his armor, his combat knife dripping with alien blood. The battle was won. Jacks moved to the rooftops, providing suppressing fire as they watched the two men slice a piece of the wall. The transformation that had overtaken Kalen started to recede, the primal rage fading, replaced by a weariness that sank deep into his bones. He looked at the others. They bore the marks of the battle, their armor damaged, their faces bruised and smeared with blood. But their eyes were clear, focused. They were the calm in the storm they had unleashed. The area, Kalen's voice, still a little rough, broke the silence. "We've got a job to do." The after-action report would read, "Reaper's Hand successfully breached Xyloxy Command Center, causing a catastrophic collapse of the enemy defense line. Casualties, minimal. Enemy casualties, substantial." The sterile terms would not capture the pure, unbridled terror that Reaper's Hand had unleashed, the savage ferocity that had shattered the Xyloxy's composure. It wouldn't describe the inhuman power they had tapped into, the primal rage that had driven them through the heart of the enemy. "Trask!" As the cleanup crew arrived, Kalen looked at his team. They were more than just soldiers. They were an embodiment of the darkest corners of the human psyche, the echoes of battles long forgotten, the raw, unchecked savagery that lay beneath the surface of civilization. They were the monsters that the Xyloxy had unknowingly awakened. They were the reason that the universe would whisper of humanity's capacity for darkness. And as the next dropship arrived, Kalen knew they would be called again to unleash the storm once more. They were Reaper's Hand, and their savagery was the ultimate weapon. The Xyloxy would learn that humanity, when pushed, could be something far more terrifying than they had ever imagined. They were more than just warriors. They were the embodiment of war itself.